All right, welcome everyone. It is finally time. The first episode of the Adam Hazara Show is streaming tonight. As you can see, I'm streaming from my own studio of my own bedroom up here in Burke, Virginia, and I cannot be more excited to share this experience with you guys. Got some stuff to get into talk about. So on this podcast, as you guys probably saw in my previous tweets, we're going to be talking about some stuff related to Lake Bragg sports. We're also going to talk about some other Nova topics too going on in high school sports. Now, this is a quick disclaimer. I'm not going to be mentioning anything about the Hayfield football scandal that's been going on right now. Of course, that's been one of the big headliners in Northern Virginia high school football right now. So just keep that in mind. I think that's up to the people over at the Fairfax County Times, guys over at All Hitches, Chad Ricardo over at Fox 5 to talk about. Over here, we're just going to be talking about some nice Northern Virginia high school football. And of course, we're still awaiting to see if these games are even going to be played on Thursday. Of course, last week in that court ruling, Hayfield was let back into the playoffs and just happened to be it is what it is. And so now, of course, if you guys heard of the FCPS school board meeting last night, there's been reports that there are several regional 6C coaches who have teams in the playoffs that are threatening to boycott the postseason if Hayfield is kept in. And they said that they will make a final decision later in the week again. No decision has been made yet, but we will see what happens next couple of days. I'll make sure to keep you guys updated with that on social media. So just wanted to quickly get that out of the way, that I will not really be mentioning anything just really off of field with Hayfield's football scandal. If I'm going to be talking about Hayfield, it'll be their on-field performances only, nothing related to the scandals or anything about, the faking of the addresses or, anything that they've done illegal, anything that's obviously been reported in those Fairfax County Times articles or anywhere else on the internet or anywhere in the media. So just keep that in mind, guys. And first of all, before we get into today's show, I did want to get you guys comfortable with a few of these show's components. So first of all, I want to point out that these shows will probably air usually on Tuesdays and Saturdays. Now, this is going to be subject to change depending on how the show is going to work. But for right now, probably at least 2 shows in a week, maybe 3 at some point as we maybe get in some we're going to be covering basketball too on the show. And it's coming very soon. Wake Braddock's basketball seasons for boys and girls, as well as all the other Nova teams in the area, are going to be starting up. And then, and of course, they actually have more games frequently during the week than football does. So we'll probably get 3 games at some point. Also, that'll probably be for baseball and softball. That also happens too with those sports as well once we hit the spring. We'll also start the show with shout-outs, if any. And then after that, we'll probably go into the main topics of the show, which I will announce in a few minutes. And then answer any mailbag chat questions. So if you guys are wondering what the mailbag is or chat questions, basically, it's a place where you guys can put down your own questions for me to answer, and I will give my opinion on them. I just don't want the show to be about me. I want this guy to be about you too as well, guys. I want you guys to have a part in the show too and play a significant role. So I'm really excited about I'll be announcing that. You guys will be able to ask me questions, and so I will be able to answer them to the best of my ability. So keep that in mind as well. And also, that will be happening towards the end of the show. We'll go over main topics before that. And then we'll start with some shout-outs right now, as I just mentioned. So first of all, we got a few Wake Braddock football shout-outs. We got a few players who just earned some offers just recently within this month. First of all, I want to shout out Wake Braddock star interior lineman Trent Payne. He was first team All-District this year yet again. And he was also the Patriot District Defensive Player of the Year. Big congratulations to Trent for earning his second PW Fro. That it is from Elon, which of course is down in North Carolina. That's his second D1 offer. He got a PWO from Furman a little while ago. So congratulations to Trent Payne, also, who's had a pretty historic season for Bruins. We'll get more into that later in the show. And secondly, I do want to shout out Bruins offensive lineman and a mammoth 6'6" Marwin Diop for earning his second D1 offer too, like Trent Payne from St. Francis. His first D1 offer he received back in July from Delaware State. So congratulations to Marwin as well. Both him and Payne, two very talented players, core pieces of the Bruins' success again on a field this year. And then third, I do want to shout out the Bruins' unanimous first-team All-District quarterback and senior Michael Cerise. He's done a great job leading the Bruins this year as well, just as he did last year when the Bruins made their state title run. He just earned another D3 offer from Lawrence University out of Appleton, Wisconsin. That's pretty far, but nevertheless, congratulations to the man Cerise for earning another D3 offer. I know he has a couple other ones, but he has not yet announced where he's going to commit. So again, big kudos to all those fellows over there at Lake Braddock and leading their football team this year. And hopefully we'll get to see them play on Thursday night, bearing that there's not any change in the schedule with the ongoing stuff with Hayfield and all the other coaches, with the potential boycotting stuff that could happen. So hopefully, we can see a game on Thursday. And also, if there is a game Thursday, Lake Braddock, of course, be hosting Mount Vernon, the 7th seed out of the National District. Lake Braddock will be at home as the 2 seed. And of course, me and my broadcasting pal, John Fedor, will be on the call on the Lake Braddock Student Broadcasting YouTube channel. So be sure to check that out if you guys are interested in tuning in to watch some Bruins playoff action. So as we get in, I just want to thank my 2 viewers right now. You guys are the first viewers to be a part of the show right now. So I thank you guys very much for the support, and I look forward to growing a big audience, hopefully, in future shows. So we got a couple topics that I do want to go over today. So the first is I'm going to do just a little rundown of Lake Braddock's 2024 regular season now that it has concluded. And also we are going to kind of go over a preview of Lake Braddock's matchup with Mount Vernon on Thursday. Now, again, nothing has been confirmed that the game with Mount Vernon is going to be postponed. As we know right now, the game is still a go. And of course, we'll know later in the week, as it was in that Fairfax County Times article that was published earlier today, that all the coaches will be making their decisions later in the week. So my guess is you'd probably be expecting that probably around Thursday, since that's when the games will be played. So you'll probably see maybe a decision made that day. Of course, last week, Friday was the day that we heard that Hayfield was back into the playoffs, and it was kind of a last-minute thing. So I wouldn't be surprised that the same thing were to happen again. We could, who knows, we could hear something tomorrow. But there's a lot of things just to keep in mind here. Of course, a lot to unravel here. And, of course, what's been going on with Hayfield. But again, as I said earlier in the show, that's up to Fairfax County Times and other media sources to report on. So here we will start Lake Braddock's 2024 regular season review. So, of course, they finished the year 8-2. Coach Doc, of course, has another winning season under his belt. He's never had one in his Lake Braddock tenure. And that just shows you how good he's been. Of course, he was this year's Patriot District Coach of the Year. If you guys did not know, he did win that accolade just a few days ago. So congratulations to Coach Doc on that. And, the season started off with a little bit of a struggle before the Bruins really found their form. They started off, of course, winning their season opener down at Colgan. Of course, that first game was postponed a day later to when it was originally supposed to be played due to thunderstorms. But, Wake Braddock was able to make a statement in that first game, winning big over Colgan 63-21, which has served themselves as a big threat in the Patriot District this year, as they would later go on to show. And, however, in weeks 2 and 3, they lost to some very good Madison and Westfield teams. Those are two teams that are some of the best teams around here. Madison and Westfield have been, some of the biggest threats in Northern Virginia high school football for quite a while now. And of course, even with Westfield having Coach Vossler over there, after replacing the legendary Kyle Simmons, who led Westfield to several state appearances and state championships in the 2010s. Coach Vossler, who was, of course, former Robinson head coach, has done a really great job over there in his first year and still giving some life to that Westfield program. Of course, Madison, Coach Count over there, leading his team, arguably the best team in 60, in my opinion. I think it's probably just going to come down to probably Madison and Washington Liberty Net region over there. I think Madison has much more talent. They have a lot more firepower than what Washington Liberty has to offer. So I'll probably expect to see Madison again in states for, I believe, the third straight season, as they were been the last 3 years. This would be their fourth. So they've won 3 straight regional titles, 2 state finals appearances, of course, in 21-22 respectively. And they're still, of course, a threat this year. And a lot of people seemed like, they started off 1-2, losing to those really good teams. But then, all of a sudden, a lot of people were thinking, hey, this Wake Braddock team is not, this Wake Braddock team that's a lot younger this year on defense, even though we're bringing back a lot of offensive prowess on offense. With Cerise at quarterback, you had, Kai Austin as wide receiver, who had 1,000 yards the previous season and who's a William and Mary commit. You had Robert Holling coming back, a really good receiving option. You had Zach Hibner at tight end coming back, who was only a sophomore last year, a junior this year. And you also had a good amount of the O-line. You had Marwin Diop coming back, we just mentioned, got the D1 offer from St. Francis. You had Titus Ackle, who's FCS bound, coming back. And then I think you had a couple other stars because you had Ben York obviously going to UVA. You had Izan Elhag also leaving through graduation. But again, the Bruins have had a couple other guys step up this year. Will Fedor, of course, the younger brother of my broadcasting buddy John Fedor. He earned second team All-District honors as just a sophomore. And also had Kyle Harold, a junior, earning honorable mention All-District honors at guard. So, the Bruins definitely have a couple guys in the making there, with Will Fedor at center as well, as I forgot to mention that. My apologies. And then, so of course, it seemed like a lot of people started to forget that Wake Braddock was, a good team, that they were, not nearly as good as they were in previous years. And that seemed to be the case. But then all of a sudden you kind of went and saw that they went on to really sharpen themselves up going into district play. Now, going 1-2, not the way you want to go into district play, but then all of a sudden, from week 4 onward, they went undefeated, knocking down West Potomac. They knocked down some really good Fairfax, South County, and West Potomac games against some very close teams. And, of course, you're talking about the defense, which really graduated a lot of guys. You had Ryan Maffini, Lucas Maffini, the twin brothers. You had Kim Tatui in the secondary, Aaron Naduma on a D-line, Ethan Morris at linebacker. Just some of the names to mention. You also had Jack Rubino in the secondary. You also had Jacob Weiss, who was big on defense as well. And really the only 2 defensive starters you were bringing back for Bruins on that side this year was Trent Payne on a defensive line. And then you also brought back Xavier Main at linebacker, and both really good players. Xavier Main, one of the leading tacklers in the whole state of Virginia this year in high school football. And he'll be playing with Kai Austin next year, his Wake Braddock teammate at William and Mary. And so the defense was kind of struggling to find their form, especially at secondary, which has some new guys this year. And again, as it's kind of Lake Braddock, was starting off 1-2. People forgot how good they were, and they started kind of looking towards some of the other great teams. One that really surprised me was actually Marshall, who started off 3-0, and everyone's talking about, they were scoring all these points against these national district opponents because their first 3 opponents were national district teams, and we know, none of them was named Hayfield. They were all kind of the puny type of national district teams. I mean, kind of all of them, in my opinion, are not that good in that district, except for Hayfield, of course, with their immense talent that they have, regardless of the recruiting scandal that's been going on over there for about the last 5 months now, as it's been reported in all the articles. But, certainly a lot of people were thinking Marshall was actually a big threat. And I kind of thought, I saw other places, All Hitches was ranking Marshall over Lake Braddock in air rankings. I saw on, I think, Virginia Preps that Marshall was ranked over Lake Braddock. And I'm like, really? I mean, I haven't really seen Marshall having that much talent over Lake Braddock. Lake Braddock, I thought, had a lot more talent than that Marshall team did. And don't get me wrong, Marshall was a very solid team over in the Liberty District this year. They definitely had a lot of fight in them, led by Ethan Labishker at running back. He was amazing. And so, some people really, again, just kind of look towards the other teams and were kind of crossing Lake Braddock off their list, which, again, was not so surprising to me, but I'm pretty sure was surprising to a lot of other people following Nova football as well. But like I said, the defensive concerns, they were addressed. Eventually, they flattened themselves out. And you always know with a program like Lake Braddock, always we know with a coach like Mike Doherty, that Lake Braddock was eventually going to come on defense. It took some time for the younger guys who were a bit inexperienced to make a name for themselves. I said this actually on All Hitches at the beginning of the season, that they had to form an identity of their own on defense. Offensively, they were bringing back a lot of players, and they kind of had to deal with that the previous year. But the thing, offensively, it's, Coach Doc told me this. Offensively, it's not as hard to form an identity than it is defensively. Offensively, you have to just go with kind of a scheme that's rolling, and, the players really know the scheme well. And, with the scheme, the Bruins always just seem to have the right players who fit into the scheme. Coach Doc really likes to run that up-tempo spread offense that really causes a lot of mismatch in the offensive game, and that's really what he's been using, for a long time. I think even before his Lake Braddock tenure, I think it's kind of been, more so adapted from when Jim Poitras, former Lake Braddock head coach, won for Mike Doherty, and of course, who led Lake Braddock to 2 region titles in 2009, 2010, and of course the state finals in 2009 when they lost to Thomasdale that year. They started really using the, that spread formation as well. As kind of developed also from a former West Springfield head coach. I believe he kind of learned it from him around the time of the late 2000s, early 2010s. Kind of around a time when, probably when I was 3 years old, and, people were still playing the original Wii all the time. So, just think about how long it's been since, it's been that time. But, Coach Doc still did a really good job with that offense this year. Of course, on defense, though, defensively, though, he told me in an interview earlier this season that it's harder to change the defense because defensively, it's a lot harder to adapt to a scheme. You kind of have to keep, putting guys in certain places and trying to plug and play and, really trying to see what works for all your new guys that are kind of inexperienced and, like I said, again, trying to make a name for themselves. So again, that's what Coach Doc was really trying to aim for. And eventually it did work out. Eventually, we'll mention some of the guys who obviously, kind of made a name for themselves this year. Of course, they had, in D1 besides Payne, they had Jason Tran and Ryan Bake. Now I know Ryan Bake is actually one of the top defensive lineman prospects in the class 2026 in the state of Virginia, and he was actually second team all-district. Both of them were. So shout out to them. Jason Trent actually came over from South County. That's probably a player actually South County wants to have, right, especially a lot throughout the season, because on defense this year, they've actually sustained a lot of injuries. They've really struggled more so than the previous seasons this year. This is actually their first season, I think, finishing under 500 since probably 2010, which is the last time that they were not in the playoffs. So, I mean, it's been quite a long time since the Stallions have experienced something like that. And so, now I know they're a lot healthier now towards the end of the season. They seem to be ready for playoffs if they happen. So, South County, don't leave South County out of the picture. They're still in the playoffs for a reason, even if they were still 4-6 this year. Still a very, very good team, even with the injuries they endured. They still got some really talented players over there, too, on both sides of the ball. And so some other positional players on defense, especially a linebacker besides Xavier Maine, who I mentioned was one of the leading tacklers in the state this year. They have Jack Putsednik, who's been great. They had Cody Blaylock, 2 sophomores who have been really good. Coach Doc actually told me that he likes the linebackers that are young and coming for Bruins and that have made a name for themselves this year, as I keep saying. Probably going to be using that phrase a lot. But anyway, that's something to keep in mind, is that he really liked the linebackers there as well. I believe both of them got all-district honors. I believe Jack Putsenk was an honorable mention, and then Cody Blaylock was second-team all-district. And another guy to watch out for is Matthew Holcomb, who actually surprisingly didn't have all-district honors. I mean, I'm going to pull up his stats right now. So he actually has some pretty good stats. I mean, he had about 60 tackles, 59 to be exact, so one short of that. He had a pick, 2 passes defended, and a fumble recovery. And you're not telling me that's somehow all district, not even honorable mention. I mean, that's pretty surprising. Now, the thing with Holcomb is that he is kind of, he's kind of a, I forget the term, but he's kind of a safety, I think like a safety outside linebacker hybrid. So maybe that had something to do with him being considered for all district. Maybe they just couldn't find a spot for him because he was back and forth between safety and linebacker. Excuse me there. So maybe that might have had something to do with him not getting all district. But I certainly think he was definitely in conversations up there for at least honorable mention. And I think, a guy that a lot of Bruins fans should definitely not be sleeping on. And then in the secondary, you had, again, all new starters. You had guys like Jordan Sharp, Elijah Oladipo, who were seniors. A couple guys are going to be gone after this year. I believe they had a couple picks apiece. Last time I checked on Max Preps. And of course, some of the underclassmen they had come in were Khalid Cash, Xander Quadros, and I know Walker Mitchell. And I'm blanking on another guy, but Camden Gallant. Camden Gallant, who led the Bruins in interceptions this year with 3. So you kind of had him step up, and he was actually kind of a guy who really started coming to his own midseason, I believe. If you guys can correct me on this if I'm wrong, but from what I gathered, Walker Mitchell, who was also another underclassman defensive back that the Bruins had, kind of got injured in the season. I know he had some lower body surgery after he endured an injury. I think early on in the season, it was around the midpoint of this year. But then Cameron Gallant came in and just led the Bruins in picks, earned second-team all-district honor. So talk about a guy leading a secondary class full of new guys. That's really something for Gallant to be hold. And so be sure to watch out for him this year. Of course, I mentioned Xander Quadros, very physical cornerback, like Coach Till, the Bruins defensive coordinator, has said. He also earned second-team all-district honors, and I believe he had the most tackles as well. And of course, I see Coach Laguna in the chat. Welcome, Coach Laguna. Of course, the former Bruins head coach. He's saying, let's not sleep on Hibner and Ryan Harding. I think Ryan Harding is going to be very good at tight end as well. Of course, Hibner also really good at tight end. We'll get more into those two in a second. But again, we're finishing up with these Bruins defensive backs. We have also, of course, Khalid Cash, who probably stood out the most. He was first team all-district. Let me pull up his stats real quick. Yeah, so we had a couple of picks, couple of pass defended, He had a caused fumble and 35 interception yards, as well as 38 tackles. So that's another guy who Bruins have next year. And so they have some really nice guys come back in the secondary. And it seemed like also in that last game versus Robinson, they did really struggle. But they certainly will probably pick it up. In my opinion, I think Coach Doc has what it takes to rally the Bruins together and get them back on track. I think that secondary struggled against a very pass-heavy Robinson attack, which you don't really see often. Robinson mainly ground pound with Coach Vossler, Coach I believe Bendorf way back in the day. And so, with Coach Sean Blair without Robinson, who came over from McLean in his second season, he has Jackson Scaparotto passing. He had Keegan Zylstra to pass to, and then his brother, Daniel Scaparotto. And then Zylstra was first team All-District. I know he set some receiving records at Robinson this year. So is Scaparotto. He set some passing records. So Zylstra has kind of established himself as one of Robinson's best all-time receivers, if not the best. And you guys might be saying, well, what about Matt Zanolato, who is now the wide receivers coach over at Penn State? Now, he was at Robinson. Of course, he had a really good season for Bruins in 2010 when Niebrick was there in his last season at quarterback. I believe he actually has the second – actually, he does. He has the second most the second most receiving yards in a single season by any Virginia high school receiver ever. So big shout out there to the former Bruin Matt Zanolato, and who's probably also the Bruins' best receiver all time. Speaking of which, we're talking about best receiving players all time for the Rams and the Bruins. But he didn't have any of the seasons. Any of his seasons at Robinson weren't nearly as good as that senior season he had at Lake Braddock in 2010. So just keep that in mind. And so, on a sec. So also we have the Bruins. You kind of want to review who was, kind of first team All-District. Of course, he had Cerise at QB, who led the Bruins pretty well. Even after he was kind of benched mid-season as Ty Jackson, the Bruins wanted much of an offensive spark from Ty Jackson. They thought he would give it to him. He really did. He had an explosive game versus West Potomac, over 400 passing yards and a few TDs. I always talk about for Ty Jackson, Kai Austin explosion. That was really amazing right there. To watch. That's something still to watch. And Goose Ty Jackson, who was able to get healthy for the playoffs in time, as he was out for several weeks ever since the middle of week 5 versus Fairfax. I think he hurt his ankle. And he actually came back in week 10 and played a few snaps in the fourth quarter, try to get right for a playoffs versus Robo. So, hopefully we'll see him if the playoffs are not canceled this year. Of course, what is going on with all the coaches right now. Of course, we'll mention my man, Coach Laguna in a chat talking about Zachary Hibb. First team All-District this year, arguably the best tight end in Patriot right now. And he had a massively good season. He's been much improved. That was someone that really Coach Doc wanted to get into the offense. He said he was someone that was going to have 50 catches this year, and he did. He actually hasn't eclipsed that yet, but he's getting close. I believe he has over 40. He actually had a really big game versus Robinson his last week. 153 yards, 2 TDs, probably the biggest game of his career. Of course, the second one that he had was actually a go-ahead one in the fourth quarter. It gave the Bruins the lead and was one of the difference makers to seal the deal that game. And he also had 508 yards and tied for the team lead with 6 receiving touchdowns. The other player having those is Robert Holleen. Of course, he's a younger brother as well of Matthew Hibner, who's now at SMU, and of course a national champion with Michigan last year. He was also really good on special teams as well. Second team there for All-District. 36.6 yards per punt. And then he also had 50 yards to go with his and 2 and 3 going inside the 20 as well. And I can see Coach Laguna saying, there will be a playoff appearance. Watch out for the secret weapon to go with Trent Payne. Yeah, Josiah Bomey. Now, if you guys don't know Josiah Bomey, that's another guy you really want to watch out for on a Bruins D-line next year. He'll probably be Payne's successor. Everyone loves him. He squats and benches insane amounts. Probably that most talented player in their freshman class in the class 2028 right now, which is what it is this year. And, of course, Coach Crush over there does a really good job producing good O-linemen like Trent Payne and some other guys in the past. Josh O'Malley seems to be that next best guy. He got some key times, some big moments this year. Got some. He had a forced fumble versus Fairfax. Very good Fairfax team, of course. He's shown a lot of promise. There's been a couple of times where he's had some blocked field goals, and that's a guy who already has a build to probably be a starter on a lot of varsity teams. You probably talk about, teams that probably don't have as big of populations, and you kind of have to have guys, probably younger guys that probably will really have to step up and don't really have much of a big talent pool to pull from. Josh Bowman's probably one of those guys, coaches would really be looking at and would probably be a starter on a lot of teams this year. I mean, you could, and probably a lot of good programs at the varsity level, such as, South County, who's had a lot of defensive injuries this year, as I mentioned earlier, when talking about Jason Tran, who transferred from South County going before this fall season. That's probably someone that you want to go with. And of course, got to mention Ryan Harding on offense. As Coach Laguna says in the chat right there, he's been great. Not a lot of time varsity this year, but some good time over at the JV level for Bruins. Probably going to be a guy to watch, of course, as a tight end and on defense as well, potentially. Of course, he was actually really big in baseball last year. He was kind of a freshman. He was a starting outfielder out in left field. And, the Bruins, I know in left field, were trying to plug and play a lot of guys here, trying to have trouble to find a very competent left fielder for him. And in comes Ryan Harding, who during a spring break tournament really stepped in for him big and never looked back as he was the starting outfielder for the rest of the season. He really showed a lot of promise. That's going to be a player, of course, to watch for Lake Bragg baseball in the coming few years as well. And so if I were to give the Bruins a grade for this overall season, I'd probably go with, an A. Coach Doc did exceptionally well, for the Bruins, coaching him again. Of course, I believe his 8th straight winning season. His first season was in 2017. He made some pretty good decisions. Of course, he had presence of mind to start Ty Jackson during week 4 versus West Potomac, and then moving Cerise over to safety. The Bruins were kind of struggling to put up some big points offensively, and then Coach Doc realized that and really put him into the driving seat for Lake Braddock. Now, of course, Ty Jackson got hurt, but of course, if he probably had been the all district, if he had not gotten injured. So it's probably someone you want to watch out for there. You have, that's probably also a guy who, probably would have been unanimous first team all district 2 as Cerise was had he not gotten injured. I mean, he was monstrously good. And you probably expect that same production because he'd even shown it versus a very tough Fairfax team in week 5. That was a game we had Carl Frederick from Prep Red Zone in a booth. Big shout out to him as our guy, and I'll just say Adam Schefter of Nova High School football. And so, and also another thing out of Ty Jackson, that's another guy who, just like Matthew Holcomb earlier, as I mentioned, that's another guy who probably could have been first team all district as well. And so, I don't think he got it because he just didn't play much. Of course, it's not his fault, but he got injured. But again, but actually, if I pull up his stats right here and I actually have him for the full season, he had 806 passing yards and I believe eight touchdowns thrown, only 3 picks, and a 129.2 QB rating in 6 games. And he didn't even get honorable mention. So, but still, nevertheless, he still had a great season right there. Again, we want to point out some of the other first-team All-District players before we move on to this next segment. I do also want to make another point. The Bruins could have probably also had 3 first-team All-District receivers. They had Kai Austin, and of course, Zach Kibner, tight end, was also first-team All-District. They probably also would have had Robert Holling, who was second-team All-District. He led the Bruins in receiving yards, which he had over 600. He had 6 TDs, which, of course, like I said earlier, tied for a team lead with Hibner. And, he was probably in contention for first-team All-District. I was kind of surprised he didn't get it over Austin because Holling actually had slightly better stats than Austin and also played a couple more games than Kai did. But again, they probably have 3 of them, and, just because of that, Bruins are probably the best team in the district. And, of course, the guy mentioned a really good running game with Bordeaux and Holmes. Really, they can really switch it up with, Bordeaux being a power back with second-team All-District. He could have also been first-team All-District too, but because Mark Anthony White over at West Springfield, D'Angelo Duarte over Alexandria City had over 1,000 yards, it's going to be really hard to beat that. But still, there's just overall a lot of really good running backs in the Patriot District this year. And overall in the state, there's a lot of really good class of 2025 running backs this year as well. So just keep that in mind. So, and actually all 3, Austin, Holling, and Hibner all had over 500 receiving yards. First time the Bruins had done that in a while. And he was also shown some good wide receiver 1 capability. Of course, he was the wide receiver 1 option when Kai Austin was out for a few games in the middle of the season. He was great there. So shout outs to him again. Now I'm guessing that, the reason why Holling probably wasn't first team All-District was because, then he would be first team All-District too with Kai Austin, the coach. And I think it's the coach's, vote on it. So they probably didn't want, 2 Bruins receivers getting first team All-District if they want to show some love to the other receivers in the district. And usually there's 4 first-team All-District receivers, it seems like. Before this year were Austin. You got Darius Childs over from West Potomac. You had Trevian Campbell over at South County. And then Keegan Zalistra over at Robinson. So those were before. But certainly I think, Fort Vapor Bruins probably will have some success there as well. And overall have the best offense in the district because of that. No one has better tight end. No one has better receivers than the Bruins do. No one has a better run game, and they also have 2 really good quarterbacks, and probably some guys that the Bruins would would totally kill for, especially with the depth. They actually have some guys who technically aren't starting most of the snaps that could still get still got All-District runners like Holmes, and he was actually tied with Bordeaux for a team lead with touchdowns with 11. I see Coach Laguna over there saying that it also come from the success of Max Berrigan, the kicker. Yes, Max Berrigan was also really good this year for the Bruins. He was second team All-District as well. Has a very good leg. Had a very good game. I know he struggled a little bit to get some PATs down at some points this season, but again, he was still really good and overall very efficient. That last game versus Robinson this season, he was 5 for 5 in PATs. So that's something to keep in mind. He looks like he's maybe a bit hot going into the playoffs. And also one senior I did want to mention is Brown Callanan, who has been a monster in 3 games has come back. Started the season a bit late. Didn't start until week 8, by the way. And he was a big part of Bruins' defensive line last year. But he's had 3 sacks. Or in 3 games, he's had 7 sacks. And he's been a massive pressure cooker off the edge for Bruins. They had Trent Payne coming off the interior, but no one had gotten the sack production that Brown Callanan was producing much for his last 3 games of the season. Him and Payne actually came up with some really, really big sacks. That helped Bruins win some of those games against those tough opponents like South County and West Springfield, and especially in that Robinson game where Robinson really put a big fight. That was a Robinson team that was a lot weaker this year and compared to some years in the past. Sean Blair still trying to get a winning season under his belt there. Not if at Coach Fossler stage yet where he's going to have a bunch of consecutive winning seasons in a row. A lot of people are confident that he is going to get to that point though. And so Bruins, that was a game where it kind of really also felt like was battle with Burke again. So, and has, you would see in the past with a lot of the other teams that Lake Braddock would face, in terms of facing those tough Robinson squads in the past, when Bendorf and Bossor were there. It'd always be, exciting. It'll always be really close, a lot of back and forth scoring. And that's what the last game of the season was for Robinson and the Bruins. So overall, really good season again for the Bruins. Of course, I just want to shout out quite a few players there. And now we're going to get into the preview of sort of what Wake Braddock's going to be going up against Mount Vernon, bearing the idea that there is going to be a game this Thursday at 7 p.m. Hopefully there will be, so we, Bruins can play, and we don't have at that point we won't have to worry about all this stuff going on with Hayfield. But they'll coaches will do what they'll do. What happens, whatever happens. And there's actually a chance I might not even commentate again this season, but again, it's out of my control. But nevertheless, it's been great serving you guys. Thank you guys for all the support again on broadcast on here tonight. It's been an honor serving you guys yet again. So thank you very much. So going into the game on Thursday, of course, this is actually the second year in a row the Bruins have faced the majors in the postseason, and in the regional quarterfinal round, the Bruins won against them last year 49-16. And, the Bruins are actually facing a majors team that brings back a lot of the players the Bruins faced last year. Hudson Grimsley at quarterback, Matthew Moreau at receiver. We'll kind of break down a few of those players in a second. And this is also the third time in the last 5 years the Bruins have faced Mount Vernon playoffs. Lake Braddock is 3-0 in those games. Actually, 2 times, I beg your pardon. Yeah, third time in the last 5 years teams have met. Bruins are actually 2-0. Of course, last year, and then that really exciting 2019 regional semifinal game where it went to overtime. And then Mount Vernon actually almost won. That was probably the last time, we probably saw a national district team that was legitimately really good and probably making a run for states until Hayfield this year. So, also Mount Vernon is one of the few non-Hayfield teams to accomplish that, in the last few years and making it that far and actually seeing a national district team getting past the first round of playoffs. And again, the national district, if you guys don't know, it's a district's just struggled historically. It's just been historically awful. And, they've had some factors, not a big talent pool since the school's demographics and populations over there are not as big. But again, they've just really struggled, and, you're terrible. So, that's what it's kind of been for a lot of those teams. And Mount Vernon has had some of those years as well, but actually not as much as some of those other national district teams such as Annandale and Lewis and Justice. So, so obviously your Bruins, again, have your number last year, winning 49-16. That was a game where, of course, Kai Austin had a 95-yard touchdown run. Actually set a record for the most receiving yards in a game on a throw in a game, 95 yards, and that was actually one of the biggest probably runs in the state last year. Whenever you go 95 yards, it's always going to be one of the biggest runs you'll ever see in that situation. Also, Mount Vernon is still looking for a first win versus Lake Braddock, dating back to their first ever matchup in 2015. Now, that was kind of during a time when Mount Vernon and Lake Braddock were in the same district. So just keep that in mind. Lake Braddock has really dominated versus the majors. Mount Vernon still looking for that first W. Of course, that's the kids say these days. Oh, this just in. Coach Laguna saying that Marwin Diab just got an offer from Hampton. Congratulations to Marwin. So Coach Laguna being a good media source here in the chat. So congratulations to Marwin real quick for getting his third D1 offer. Of course, you mentioned he got an offer from St. Francis earlier in the show. So now he has free along with his two other offers from St. Francis and Delaware State as he got back in July. So congratulations to Marlon on that as well. Can't wait to see what he'll accomplish in the coming future. So back to kind of a preview. Mount Vernon seems to be, they were 5-5 this year. They're second in a district behind, of course, Power and Hayfield. And Coach Laguna is actually saying that there is an update on the playoff situation. Now, I'm not checking Twitter right now, as I'm recording the show, but as soon as I get through this segment real quick, we will announce that. So, Coach Laguna, if you could please wait on out, we could get through this segment. That would be great. But thank you for sharing the news. So we will see if whether or not there will be a situation. But again, we will get through. We will finish up with this segment over here. Coach Isaiah Taylor over there at Mount Vernon, he says that coming into this year during the offseason, they've made a commitment to getting bigger, faster, and stronger. And they have, a couple explosive guys over on offense. And Coach Taylor, he's actually only 29 years old, came over from Wicominco High School over in Maryland, turned him from a pretender into one of the better teams in the national district. And so, of course, we mentioned, they have Hudson Grimsley, who's a very good quarterback over there. First team all district, I believe he just got an offer from Waynesburg University. He passed over 1,300 yards this year, QB rating of 114, 16 touchdowns, also a good dual threat and ground, 231 yards, 2 touchdowns on 41 carries, and 5.6 per attempt. And of course, we also mentioned Matthew Moreau, who was all region as a receiver and first team as a punt returner last year, and is also all first team all district again this year. He has over 820 yards this year, 846 actually, and 13 touchdowns. It's probably some more in a national district. And there's actually an argument there that Moreau is probably the best non-Hayfield player in the national district. He's been really good. He can score a lot in the end zone, get massive yardage, and probably does it better than nobody else. He's also able to score against some really good defenses. Excuse me for that burp there. He had 2 touchdowns versus Lake Brack in the playoffs last year on 109 yards and 8 catches. And then he also, I know, scored a touchdown versus Westfield this year against a very tough Westfield defense led by Coach Vossler. And he's also shown some good running capability as well with 317 yards and 3 touchdowns on 24 carries, 13.2 per attempt this year. Also very good returner as well. A lot good nuance in this game. He's got elite route running, separation, has a lot now a knack for big plays and, keeping a defense on their heels. He actually runs the whole route tree, making him very shifty up there and versatile and trying to run routes and throwing defenses off. He can also serve as a nice little scat back hybrid. He's only 5'8", 155 pounds, but he is explosive and also one of the biggest stock riders in the class 26. And, expect that Grimsley, who's also regarded having a very good arm as well. Expect that Grimsley-Moreau combination to really come about that game versus Mount Vernon. Of course, Moreau had some success versus Lake Brack with those 2 touchdowns last year. And Coach Taylor's probably going to repeat that. This game is going to be played. And so, also one thing I do, will keep in mind is that it seems like Grimsley targets Moreau quite a bit. That could be a problem, as it could be maybe too predictable for some teams. Now again, as I mentioned, he does run the whole route tree, so he could really throw out defense of that. But again, you could probably just send double coverage. The Bruins could add him, and so as a lot of other teams as well, and really try to and could really block him from making any of those big plays, as he has that big knack for it. So it's probably going to be important for Grimsley to kind of change up in that matchup if it's played. And he also has, a couple other guys over there, such as CJ Coleman, sophomore. I believe he's the sophomore strong safety. He was first team All-District at DB and was second team All-District wide receiver sophomore. And then he also had DeWitt Bolsey, who was honorable mention at tight end. So maybe you'll see those guys targeted a bit more and, try to throw Bruins, very good Bruins defense off. And of course, despite the struggles this season, they've still been very good. And my prediction for this game is that, Lake Braddock should probably win this game. This should be a game, if it's played, this should be a game where Braddock blows them out of the water. Mount Vernon seems to be one of the better National District teams, but again, they're not as nearly as talented as Lake Braddock. They don't have the near D1 talent that Lake Braddock does with, a couple of their offensive linemen, of course, with Kai Austin and, a couple of, a wide receiver, not as good as, Xavier Main on defense, who's D1 at William and Mary next year. Trent Payne, who's getting D1 offers and looks to be getting more notice now with his offer from Elon the other day. But still, they're but even though with, Mount Vernon is still one of the better National District teams, they're still probably not the strongest, in terms of, sizing them up with Patriot District competition. So just something to also keep in mind as well. As we've been going on for about 52 minutes now into the show. Again, thank you guys for the support this evening. And so it is time for our mailbag segment now for today. We only have one mailbag question, and it is from Coach Laguna, of course, who's been right in the chat here on this stream the whole time. So a big shout out to man over there. Coach Laguna, of course, has helped me out and John out on a lot of broadcasts. No one does it better than he does. But his question was, if I could pull it up here. Pull it up real quick. I'm trying to find it. Okay, so his question is, so based on the recent news, the 8 teams that are playing for a spot first 8 semis, so that's all the 8 teams in the Region 6C, do you think that the preparation will hurt teams in the near future, especially if the first round is played Thursday, then the second round is the following Tuesday? I definitely do think it does. Now, here's the thing. It puts all the teams kind of at a disadvantage at an equal level. Even Hayfield. Even if Hayfield plays, they're still at a disadvantage because their players will be well rested. It doesn't matter how good their players are, with Juju Preston at receiver, with Jeffrey Overton at running back, both FBS commits. Isaiah French, who's a 3-star quarterback there. Vince Ordenis at wide receiver too. Ian Hall for the Hawks as well. And that the freshman DB they have who has the offer from Virginia Tech. All of them are going to be under that same caveat that they're going to be not fully prepared in sense of proper conditioning. They're going to really have to, hone down on that. And so, yeah, I do think it will hurt the teams in the future, because, again, you're not coming in fully prepared. But, again, I think really the way to combat that is by having really good depth and making sure your players are well prepared, especially your backups, because, just in case, you could have your starters get injured, and that's actually been a big concern of a lot of the coaches is that, playing these, playoff games with not a whole week span to prepare, and it's only, you only get a couple days less. That's not going to be good, for players health, most certainly. And, I definitely agree that it will play a major factor in how the players perform and, being durable enough. But I think the thing that will combat that is having good depth. That's something that the Bruins really do have. Again, we mentioned earlier how they do have some all-district guys with some very good depth, like, Peyton Holmes at running back, who, usually it's Bordeaux who's a starting running back, but it's Peyton Holmes. They also have Brown Callanan, who can run the ball really well. Of course, coming back, he can, of course, he can play the, edge really well. They have, of course, at quarterback, Ty Jackson as well. They have someone who's already varsity ready, as we've seen before. So that's another player there. Of course, Coach Laguna mentioned Ryan Harding. That's someone on defense in a tight end, which is say, hypothetically, I'm not saying this at all, which say hypothetically, if Zach Hibner gets hurt, that's also someone that could get hurt too, as anybody could. And so that is what's going on right now. And so, Coach Laguna, if you're still with us, if you would like to announce the update regarding the playoff situation, we would love to hear it. If you are still with us here on episode 1 of the Adam Hazara Show, we are just about an hour in. And of course, I think we've had about a max of 6 viewers tonight. So thank you, everyone, for coming on to the show. Of course, I hope you guys are having a fantastic day over here. Now, I can say that I'm having a pretty good day myself. Of course, I'm excited to be here with you guys in the first episode of the Adam Hazara Show, talking some good Lake Braddock football. And so, here we go. So Coach Laguna says in the chat that coaches and admin are meeting with the superintendent, Dr. Reed of Fairfax County Public Schools, and the meeting is taking place at 7 tonight, and it's 6:58 right now. So that meeting is starting in just 2 minutes. And also, I do want to mention another thing, is that there was an article from Defector Media. It's a website that published this long and really in-depth article about the whole Hayfield scandal. And at the end of the article, it mentioned how the writer, Ryan McKenna is his name, or Dave McKenna, actually, I beg your pardon. And he was apparently talking to someone about a former coach. And I didn't say which school, I didn't say the coach's name, but he said how this coach was apparently working with the HSL to try to file injunction against Hayfield. And so to try to kind of reverse the court ruling that was last week to reinstate Hayfield back into the 6C playoffs. So that's something also really wanted to point out as well. I think it's really important that you guys are informed. And of course, we are kind of reached the end of the show. It's been almost an hour. Again, it's been great seeing you guys tonight. But again, if you guys want to keep up with the latest news, you can follow me on X at Adam Hazara, and as well follow the show over on X as well at Adam Hazara Show. And if you already haven't, subscribe to the show over on YouTube. For those of you guys who have not, I would greatly appreciate it. So make sure you do that before you head off with your night. And so, yeah, I mean, it's been really great time with you guys here tonight. And also, for the mailbag segment. If you guys do have a question for the mailbag, you can either do two things. One, you can email the show at the Adam Hazara Show, all lowercase, at gmail.com with your question, or you could tag the show at Adam Hazara Show on X with your desired question. And also, again, if you also have any recommendations for topics on the show, you can also tag me as well, or send an email. Or if you have any requests to improve a show, you can also do that as well. But as we're about to sign off, of course, once again, thank you guys for tuning in tonight. It means so much to me. It's something I've been wanting to do for a while. It's taken a lot of trials and tribulations for me to try to get something done like this. And so we will see as well what will happen with the whole Hayfield situation. We should hear some news probably coming out later tonight or tomorrow morning about the coach and admin meeting with Superintendent Dr. Reed. And that meeting is just starting now at 7:01. That meeting again takes place at 7. But they're just about here done tonight. I'm going to wrap things up and say so long, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Adam Hazara Show. We'll hopefully be back on Saturday. And, of course, we'll keep you guys updated. Hopefully there will be a playoff game. That's a hope. So Saturday episode will probably be going over the Mount Vernon Lake Braddock game over there. And so thank you guys so much for tuning in. Again, make sure to follow the show on YouTube at the Adam Hazara Show. Make sure to follow the show on Twitter at Adam Hazara Show. And I will see you guys next time. Peace.